All right. Good morning, class. As we have seen in this unit, we're going to look at language and time. Language as varying through time. There are 5 issues in this unit. The first of which is related to the theories of language change. The next topic or heading, change and linguistic media. The third topic explores some types of language change, sound, vocabulary, syntax, and pronouns. And the fourth subheading is archaism, the use of archaism, archaic language, why, and some examples. And the last subtopic or heading is the change or changes that take place in the language because of the feminist movement. Feminist changes to language. All languages change over the course of time. All languages change. Malay, Arabic, English, Japanese. Of course, some languages experience more changes than others. To the point that some languages, when we look at older, the older forms of these languages, and we look at the present day forms of these languages, we might find a huge gap between how a certain language was spoken in the past and how it is spoken now. But not all languages are like that. I mean, a change takes place. But as I said, some languages may experience huge changes that the language spoken 1,000 years ago, for example, might be radically different from the language spoken today, though it's the same language. I mean, a very good example here is really English itself. If you look at how English was spoken, if you look at the English spoken, let's say 1,000 years ago, it's completely different from the language or the English used today. To the point that an English speaker, a native English speaker, a present day native English speaker would need a translator, would require translation of English texts written about 1,000 years ago. Native speakers of English will not be able to understand their own language as was spoken 1,000 years ago without translation. It looks as though it's a different language, though it's still English. But if you look at a language such as Arabic, for example, the Arabic is spoken 1,000 or even 1,500 years ago, before, for example, before Islam, before Prophet Muhammad came. Prophet Muhammad, as you know, was sent in 610 AD, about 1,500 years ago. So if you look at the language, the Arabic is spoken at the time before Islam, it is not radically different from the Arabic we use today. An Arab today can still understand the Arabic spoken or used in pre-Islamic society. Yes, some vocabulary is no longer in current usage, but generally we still can understand the Arabic used at the time without the need for a translation, as though it's a completely different language. And so some languages then change more than others or experience more changes than others. But all languages do change. Now, the fact of language change is relevant to the study of texts in several ways. But maybe as an afterthought, I would like to say one more thing about language change. Sometimes when the change is too big, over the years, this may lead not only just to dialects, but to separate languages. Over the years, over the decades and centuries, such changes may lead to separate languages. Now we have dialects of English. Each dialect has its own way of English. Now these dialects over the course of time might become even separate languages over hundreds and hundreds of years. Expanding geography, this may lead to, as I said, to these dialects becoming, or regionalisms becoming, separate languages. Languages, anyhow, might have originated from one language. All languages might have originated from one source language, one lexifier language, lexifier proto-language. So the origin might have been one language from which the languages of today have descended. So as languages, as people expand, maybe we can imagine the first human community on earth, beginning with Adam and his wife Eve and his children Cain and Abel, speaking one language. Now what this language was, we can only speculate. For me, this language, I feel it was Arabic, the language spoken by Adam. But of course there is no evidence for this, or at least I don't have evidence for this. But I feel that the language spoken by Adam was Arabic, and from Arabic we have all these languages that we have today. Anyhow, there are two theories here: the monogenetic theory, saying that the origin of language, or that all languages originated from one language. This is the monogenesis or monogenetic theory of language origin. Mono meaning one, and genetic, like the birth, genesis. And there is the polygenetic theory. Poly, that language, that there were many languages, not just one source language. Again, I am with the view that the origin was one language. God taught Adam, whichever that language was that Adam spoke, and from this language, which, as I said, I feel it might have been Arabic, because the language also, not only the language that Muhammad spoke and the Quran, this latest revelation to humanity, is Arabic, but also the language of the people of heaven will be Arabic. So it might have been Arabic, but this is not the issue now. The issue is that languages across the course of time, or through the course of time, will vary to the point that some of these variations will become complete or separate languages. So maybe the original set of all these languages was one, but as people expanded, as the human race expanded on earth, moving from a place to another, language has it changed, resulting in the many dialects and then languages, separate languages that we have today. So maybe the languages we have today were originally dialects of the same language, the same major lexifier proto-language that Adam spoke. So as his children expanded, this resulted in regionalisms and dialects, which later have become separate languages. So some of these dialects will become separate languages, over the years. Now, the next point, the fact that language change is relevant, the fact of language change is relevant to a study of texts in several ways. We need to link what we are doing in every unit to the study of text, to literary analysis. Fatima, صمت. And so we need to see how each of these units in this course book is relevant to the study of text and the analysis of literary texts, and so our ability to analyze and appreciate texts. So the study of language change, or the fact that language changes, this is relevant to the study of literary analysis and the study of text in several ways. One, a text may be a force for language change, or it may retain older usages for particular effects. A text may keep older usages for particular effects. So obviously one main reason why a text might be employing archaisms or archaic language is to convey a particular effect. A text may become difficult to understand because of language change. A text may become difficult to understand because of language change. A text that was written, as I have said, 1,000 years ago, will not only become difficult in the case of English, will not only become difficult to interpret or understand, but you need really a translator. If you read Beowulf, an old poem, here I want to write it in the chat. Beowulf is an Old English poem, a poem written in Old English about maybe 1,000 years ago. If you can look it up on the internet, you may find it. So if you look it up and you try to read it, you will be wondering whether this is English or Japanese. So a text may become difficult to understand because of language change. Not so far, about 500 years ago, at the time of Shakespeare, for example, you would find a sentence like this one I am writing in the chat: "Thou art gay." Can anyone tell me the meaning of this sentence? English sentence. We do not use this kind of language today, but this was used at the time of Shakespeare. So, what's the meaning of "thou art gay"? Come on, do you speak English, guys? I thought you spoke English. Okay. Thou art gay. Yes, would the equivalent of which in modern English would be you are happy. Thou art gay, you are happy. So it's like a different language, and this was only 500 years ago, not 1,000 years ago, or 1,500 years ago when English began. When did English begin, by the way? English began in the year 449 AD. About 1,000. So the English language is 1,500 years old. So before 449, there was no English. There was no such language as English. English began in 449. How it began, this is another story, not related to our class now. Sometimes a modern text may also deliberately use archaisms, use old forms of language. A modern text written by a modern writer may deliberately use archaic language, again, for particular effects. We shall see some examples when we look at archaisms in one of the headings in this unit. Okay, now let's move on to the theories of language change. There are two main views or accounts or theories about language change. The formalist account and the functionalist account. The formalist account or review of language change and the functionalist account or review of language change. Let's quickly look at these two theories or explanations of language change. A formalist account attributes language change to autonomous processes. The formalist account states that language change takes place within the language and by itself. Language change is caused by structural pressures that are internal to the language itself. And so change happens automatically. It is not being caused by people, for example, motivated by people, as in the functionalist view, where language change is seen as being politically motivated, socially motivated. And so the formalist account attributes language change to autonomous processes, structural pressures internal to the language itself. Those who explain language change this way, the formalist account, who give the formalist account, usually provide an example of language change as taking place because of internal pressures within the language itself. Language change is induced by autonomous processes. They give the grade vowel shift, the GRV for short, as an example. Quickly now, what is the GRV? Remember that our point is not really to discuss the great vowel shift. Our point is to present to you that one way to explain language change is the formalist view, that language changes take place within the language and by itself. So the great vowel shift is just an example. So let me give you an idea about the great vowel shift, the GRV. The great vowel shift was a massive sound change, in the phonemic system, the sound system of English, that took place between 1500 and 1700. This massive sound change that took place over the course of 200 years. By the way, I think I have missed to say something important. Let me say it now, and then we get back to the great vowel shift. Language change. We've already established the fact that language changes, but it's important to notice that for the speakers of a language at a given time or period of time, language is stable. Now, for example, there are changes taking place in English, but we do not see these changes now. For us, the speakers of English now, language is stable, structured, and stable. So the changes we get to know later. If we talk about present day English, then maybe in 100 years time, in 500 years time, in 200 years time from now, the people of the future, when they look at the English we speak now, they can see changes. When we look at the English spoken 500 years ago, 300 years ago, more or less, we can see changes. But for the speakers of the time, language was stable. Language did not seem to change. So we can only notice these changes when we look back with the benefit of hindsight. When we look back at how language was spoken, we can see the changes. But for its speakers at the time, language was not viewed as being, changing. It was stable. And so the great vowel shift, for example, for the speakers of the time, they did not notice such changes. And there was no such thing as the great vowel shift. I mean, the terminology, the description, describing what happened as the great vowel shift was made later by speakers of the language who came in a later period. Do you follow? The great vowel shift. This was, as I said, a massive sound change that meant that the front and back long vowels were raised. Okay, I know that to understand this, I have to explain to you the vowel system of English, the vowel sounds, and the different types of sounds, and the position of these sounds in the tongue, and the height of the tongue, many issues, and this goes beyond the scope of this course. This has to be discussed in a phonetics and phonology class, a pronunciation class, or maybe a class about the history of English language. But I will try to simplify it without details. Meant this massive sound change meant that the front and back long vowels were raised. Were raised. Okay, front vowels. An example of a front vowel is a and e, for example. Back vowel, oo and o, for example. If you say e and you say oo, you can see the difference in the tongue. E you feel in the front, but oo towards the root of your tongue. So the back. E, oo. Or oh as in hot, and o. Oh, o. The sound, the great vowel shift meant that the front and back long vowels, not short vowels, were raised. For example, a word such as make in modern English. In Old English, or sorry, not Old English, before the great vowel shift, a word like make in modern English was pronounced as mac. A is a front vowel, a front long vowel. The vowel was raised. So if you say a, what happens to your mouth? You see that your mouth, the opening of your mouth widens. Say as in hat. Say hat, or say mac. But say make, the the opening of your mouth narrows, becomes smaller, and you feel that the tongue in your mouth has been raised. Compare mac and make. Say mac, open your mouth now. Say mac and then make. So the vowel has been raised from a to a. So this is what is meant by these vowels being raised. Another example, so mac, the a has been raised to make it sound as make. There were two exceptions to this process, and these were the e and oo. E long vowel, e long vowel, e and oo. E is the front, oo is back. These were exceptions. These were not raised, the e and the oo, because they are already raised. They were rather diphthongized. What is diphthongized? They changed from being simple to complex. E is one sound. So any word containing the sound E before the great vowel shift, after the great vowel shift, or because of the great vowel shift, has become I. The E has become I. Two sounds. Diphthong. Monophthong mean one sound. Mono. Diphthong, two sounds. So the E has become I. For example, what was pronounced as weef would be wife now. Wife today, wife was weef at the time. Ride today was read before the great vowel shift. Bite today, beat. So the E has become I, changing from a single sound, E, to two sounds, diphthongized. I, how two sounds? We have the A and the I. The A as in cat and the I as in sit. So I, by. Your tongue glides from one sound to another. Wife. We begin with A, Y, I as in sit, ending in another sound. Y, wife. And the other exception was the U, which was diphthongized into ow. So a word having the sound U before the great vowel shift has become ow following the great vowel shift. For example, mouse today, a word like mouse would have been pronounced as moose before the great vowel shift. So the U has become ow. Again, that's a diphthong. Two sounds. U, one sound. Simple. But ow, you have the A and then U as in put. So mouse. Ow, mouse. So this is just a quick explanation of the great vowel shift. Again, remember that the point is not really to explain the great vowel shift now, so I have given you an idea, but the point is that we are looking at a view of language change as happening because of structural pressures within the language itself, rather than because of any other outside force. And so what interests linguists then here is that there seems to have been a system of interrelated changes that can be understood in relation to one another. So this is one view of language change. The other view is the functionalist account. So we have the formalist account and the functionalist account. The functionalist account sees language change as politically motivated, rather than happening because of changes in the language itself. It is caused by outside forces, politically motivated. And so here, the changes in language result from social activity, in particular from political struggle. This particular functionalist view, account theory, therefore claims that language change is socially motivated, rather than being solely motivated by the formal system of the language itself. Political, economic, and social change can result in words being pronounced in new ways and given new meanings, and can lead to new words being invented. And so language here is seen as a site of a struggle. Depending on the political party in power, depending on who is ruling the country, language may change. For example, Um, in England, in Britain, there was a form, still there is a form of tax imposed on everyone on property. This tax imposed on every or levied on property in Britain, at one point in time, this tax was called the community charge. I will write this in the chat column. The community charge. Now this very same tax was called by another group, this label, community charge, was used in the 1980s. At the same time, there was another political group opposing to the group that was using community charge. This other group devised another term, coined a new term to refer to the same tax. They used poll tax. We're talking about the same tax, but these are two social groups who have different political interests, and so each one has used a different term for the same tax, with each one giving different connotations and shades of meaning. There is a third term used nowadays to refer to the same tax, and that is council tax. And so we have community charge, poll tax, council tax, different terms coined or developed by different political groups or social groups to refer to the same tax. And so this can be given as an example of the functionalist account, that language change takes place because of politics, because of social factors, political factors, rather than changes because of the structures of the language changing by themselves, the formalist account. Okay, so that's all about the first heading or topic, why language changes or how language changes, the formalist versus the functionalist account. Let's move now to another related issue, and that is change in linguistic media. Linguistic media, we have speech and we have writing. Speech and writing. Let's talk about writing first and then speech, and see the changes in these media of communication. Writing. One of the most obvious changes that have happened to writing in English is, or can be seen in the relationship between English spelling and English pronunciation, or English phonology, how words are pronounced, and English orthography, how words are written in English. Phonology and orthography. Everyone learning English knows that the gap between English pronunciation and English spelling is so wide. Every learner of English at a certain point has suffered from the chaotic character of English spelling. This includes also native speakers. So everyone is complaining about the spelling of English. You write a word in a way and you pronounce it in a completely different, unpredictable way. English is not phonetic. What does this mean? It means that the way you write it is different from the way you say it. Look at the examples in the chat. Nur Hidayah, how would you pronounce this word? How do you pronounce this word?
Good.
Good. Very good. Okay, what about this one?
Food.
Food. Very good.
Food.
Food, yes. What about, speak louder please. What about this?
Blood.
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 The spelling of the vowel is double O in each of these three words. The spelling is OO, but is the pronunciation of OO the same in these three examples?
Different.
Different. In good, it's U, as in put. In food, it's U, long vowel. And in blood, it's Ah. So, U, U, Ah. The same spelling. Okay, let's look at another set. How do you pronounce this word?
Roy.
Okay, what about this one?
Roy.
Same or different?
Same.
Same.
Pronoun.
Okay, what about this one?
Roy. Same.
Same or different?
Same.
Same. The first one is spelled as R-O-A-D, O-A. The next one, R-O-D-E. And the third one, R-O-W-E-D, road, road, road. They're all spelled differently, but they're pronounced the same. In the earlier set, we have the same spelling, but different pronunciation. Good, food, blood. In the next set, we have same pronunciation, but various spellings. This can give you an idea about the relationship between English spelling and English pronunciation, which as you can see is unpredictable and is really chaotic. There is no way in English to predict the pronunciation of many words. The only way in English, if you want to develop accurate pronunciation, the only way in English to do that is either by listening to a native speaker of English or someone whose English you trust, or by looking up every single word you want to learn in a dictionary, in a pronunciation dictionary, such as this one, Pronouncing Dictionary by J.C. Wells. But if you want to pronounce a word based on your feeling, based on your what you think is the right pronunciation, in many cases you will get the pronunciation wrong. Just give me a second, please. Alright, Shahaya, I want you to read this poem in the chat. I've just pasted. But
Poem in the chat.
yep. But let me just warn you that you're gonna have a hard time. It's English, by the way, nothing Japanese. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I take it you already know.
Yeah. Okay. I take it you already know of tough and buff and cough and dough.
Really? Why don't you speak?
Bow or buff? Is it buff or bow? I'm not so sure.
Okay, carry on. Others may stumble,
Others
but
may
not you.
stumble. Others may stumble, but you. On hiccup, horror, love, and through. Well done.
Well, no, it's far from well done. It is not well done. It is not well done. Idan Fira, try to read.
From the
I take it.
I take it you already know of far, of flow, and bow, and cough, and low. Others may stumble, but not you. On hiccup, through, go, and through.
No, this is not English. This is Japanese.
Second,
I take it you already know of tough and bow and cough and dough. Others may stumble, but not you. I know you're very good on hiccup, thara, loch, and through. Well done. And now you wish perhaps to learn of less familiar traps. Beware of herd, a dreadful word that looks like beard and sounds like bird. And that, it's said like bed, not bead. For goodness sake, don't call it deed. Watch out for meat, and the great and the threat. They rhyme with the sweet and the straight and that. A moth is not a moth in mother. A moth is not a moth in mother, nor both in bother, broth and brother. I take it you already know of tough. Okay, now we're looking at the same sound combination or letter combination. O-U-G-H. How do you pronounce O-U-G-H? This letter combination we can see in many words in English, as in these examples. But in each case, in each of these cases, the pronunciation of the very same letter combination is different. So, I take it you already know of, this is tough. Next is tough and bow. So, ow. The next is cough. The next is dough, oh. So we begin with and then ow, and then and then o. All different, though it's the same letter combination. Others may stumble, but not you, on hiccup. The same letter combination, but now it's a schwa. Hiccup. Thara. Thara. Loch. And through. What language do we speak, guys? What language are we learning? Do you still want to continue learning English? Do you think you have made the right choice to study English? Or are you going to change now your major? Do you think it was a good idea to study English? Um, how do you pronounce this word? The same letter combination. Are you gonna pronounce it as the sound in tough or the sound in bow ow, or the sound in cough oh, or that in do o, or that in hiccup ashwa, or that in thara or that in loch oh, och, or that in through oo? How do you pronounce? How do you pronounce this word? Furlough. Which? How do you pronounce? How are you going to pronounce it? There is no way in English, as I said, to pronounce a word and be sure that your pronunciation is correct without, as I said, looking it up in a pronunciation dictionary or hearing it from someone whose English you trust. No way. What about this? How are you going to pronounce it? Are you going to pronounce it as tough, or bow, or do, or cough, or hiccup, or through, or thara? How? You cannot rely in English on your feelings, on your hunches, because English is not phonetic. Modern day, present day English is not phonetic. This wasn't the same case in the past, maybe. But present day English is not phonetic. Some languages are phonetic. Arabic is phonetic. Malay is phonetic. Italian is phonetic. Phonemic. The way it is written and the way it is pronounced are the same. But some languages are not phonetic. English is one of them, unfortunately. How would you pronounce this, Chahaya? Ghoti.
Ghot.
Yes, please.
I'm not sure.
Try.
Go,
Help her, Sakina.
Goti, perhaps? I don't know. Goti?
This is fish.
Fish.
Yeah, it's pronounced as fish. Don't look at me like that. It's not me. This is English.
No, I'm not looking at. I'm not looking at you. Sorry.
This is English. You blame the English if you want to blame someone, not me. But can we really blame the English? Even we can't blame the English, and this will lead us to why these changes have taken place in English. Anyhow, why are you surprised? It is fish. Ghoti, pronounced as fish. Or fish could have been written this way. Fish could have been written in English this way. The word fish, the sound sequence, could have been spelled in English this way. For example, okay, let's say enough or tough. How do you pronounce the GH in tough? Come on, fa. And so the GH in fish, okay, like the GH, the fa sound in tough. Okay, how do you pronounce this word, Chahaya?
Which one? The top one or
The last one now, I am writing.
Women?
Women, how do you pronounce the second sound? Women. So I.
Yeah, women.
Okay, so the second sound, the O, sounds like the second sound in fish. So GHO, GH as in tough, fa, and the O as in women, and the TI, look at this word, nation. What is the shah sound in nation? The TI, The sh sound is spelled as ti, and so the word fish could have been spelled as this in English. The word fish could have been spelled as GHOTI, as Bernard Russell, complained about the spelling of English. There have been attempts to reform, or at least calls to reform English spelling, but it is not easy. I mean, English speakers themselves complain about the spelling of English, the relationship between pronunciation and spelling. But you can imagine it is not easy to change the spelling now, after it has been standardized and millions of books have been written in English now. Because changing the spelling means that you need to dump in the sea millions of books that have been written. So it is not an easy task to reform English spelling. Read this sentence, Shahaya.
Which one?
Wait, I am writing.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Can you read this one?
Did he believe that Caesar could see the people, seize the seas? Again, did he believe that Caesar could see the people, seize the seas? Yeah, that's right.
Okay, what about this one? Can you read this one?
The silly amoeba stole the key to the machine.
Amoeba.
Yeah.
Okay, did he believe that Caesar could see the people seize the seas? The silly amoeba stole the key to the machine. Alright. Notice that here we're dealing with one sound, and that is E. As in seat, as in wheat, as in meat. But look at the spelling of the same sound in all these examples. How is it spelled in he? As E. Believe. The sound E is spelled as I-E. E. That Caesar. How is E spelled in Caesar? C as A-E. How is it spelled in the word see? As double E. How is it spelled in people? As E-O. How is it spelled in seas? As E-I. What about seas? E-A. What about silly? The silly amoeba, the silly amoeba. How about amoeba? As O-E, ame. How about key? E-Y. How about machine? I. The same sound spelled differently in how many words? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 words. One sound, 11 orthographic representations. Can you believe it? It defies belief. It defies logic. The same sound. In he it's E. Believe I-E. Caesar A-E. C double E. People E-O. Sees E-I. Sees E-A. Amoeba O-E. Key E-Y. Machine I. Do you still want to continue studying English? Or is it time to study Japanese instead?
just stay and study English instead.
You want to study English? You want to carry on studying English? If you want
Yeah,
to
we'll just carry on.
if you want to carry on, look at this. My father wanted many a village. Then, okay, what about this, Chahayri?
My father wanted many a village dame badly.
My father wanted many a village dame badly.
Badly.
Look at the pronunciation of the letter A in each of these words. Is it the same or different? In father it's A. Wanted it's O. Many it's like the vowel in sat or let or sex. And then a, many a village, ashwa, like the first sound in around or about. In village, it's I, as in sit down, vili. In dame, it's a. In excuse me. In badly, it's a. And so here we have the same spelling but different pronunciation. In the previous examples, we had the same pronunciation but different spellings. And so this can give you a great idea about the messy or chaotic character of English spelling and the relationship between English phonology and orthography or pronunciation and spelling. But now the relevant question is, the question to be asked is why? Okay, one reason, not every reason, one reason for this is the standardization of English spelling, the formalization of English spelling in the early 17th century onwards, when pronunciation continued to change. From the 17th century onwards, printed texts began to look more like modern English texts because the standards were instituted that still hold. One of the results of this is that while spellings have stabilized, pronunciations have continued to change so that spellings that once corresponded to pronunciation no longer do so. This is one of the many reasons for the difficulties that all English speakers encounter when writing, since when English spelling was formalized, it resulted in a rift between the way words were spelled and pronounced in the 17th century and the way the pronunciation of words changed over time. Now, before the 17th century, the spelling of English was not standardized, meaning in the very same text you may find the same author spelling the same word differently. Spelling was not standardized as we know it today. One way to write the word. Before the 17th century, before the attempt to standardize English spelling, we can imagine that in the same text you may find more than one spelling. We find this, for example, in Shakespeare. In Shakespearean works, sometimes you find Shakespeare spelling a word in a way, and in another piece of work, or maybe in the same piece of work, the same word being spelled differently. Now, spelling beginning from the 17th century onwards was formalized, was standardized. But while the spelling was standardized, pronunciation continued to change because language changes, as we have said, over time. So over the years, over the course of time, this has led to a discrepancy or a gap or a rift between English spelling and English pronunciation. So in the past, people, before the standardization of spelling, pronounced words the way they were written. But then, in the 17th century onwards, words began to be spelled in one way only, but pronunciation continued to change. So this has led to the problems we have today. Of course, there are other reasons for the discrepancy between English spelling and pronunciation, but this is one major reason. Okay, let's move on to speech. So we can see that in writing, it changes. Speech seems to change more rapidly than writing, partly because it is not codified in the same way. Writing is codified, written, but speech is not codified, and so we can see more changes in speech. And partly because it is open to much wider cultural variation. There are usually two causes behind changes in speech, and these are subcultures and technology. Subcultures, groups of people who are bound by a certain culture or way of life or style, and so these subcultures may introduce certain words and make it changes, use certain words that are associated with them, which will later, creep into other domains or, groups. Another cause is technology. So new technologies have brought in new ways of using English, especially in the 20th century. These technologies have caused some changes. New words have been added, in new ways of writing, text messaging, for example. So technology has led to some changes in language. Move on, some types of language change at the sound level, and then syntax, and then we move on. So we've just talked about the great vowel shift and seen how this massive sounded change has caused a change in the vowels and the pronunciation of some vowels in English. The front and back long vowels being raised. So what was A has become A. What was A has become E. So mate, a word like mate, or a word like meet now, to meet someone, meet was mate at the time, pronounced mate. So all these vowels were raised. A has become E, and A has become A, they were raised. And the E and the U were diphthongized. So the E has become I, and the U has become ow. So we've already seen examples of sound change. How do you pronounce this word nowadays? Look at the chat, please.
Night.
Night. Okay, you might wonder, and you might have wondered one day, Why do we spell the word night with k beginning with k when we do not pronounce it, when it is mute? Why do we say knife and not knife, making your classmates laughing at you at school when you said knife? I'm sure you wondered when you learned the spelling of these words one day. Why do we spell it with ka when we don't say it? What language is this? I'm sure you have said that. Well, it will be interesting to know that the ka was pronounced in these words one day. Okay, in modern English we do not pronounce it, but the kah was there one day. It was pronounced, and so in night it was the kah is there. We've just said that the pronunciation of night today was knicht in the past. Knicht. Okay, the kah was there, and the I, I've just told you that that would wait a minute. Today we say night. So I today, I have told you, was E. The sound I in modern English was E in before the great vowel shift. The E has become I. And so this was knicht, and the GH sounding as kh sound. So the kh was pronounced, the I was E, the E has become I, and so knicht. And knife was knif. The kh was pronounced, it was sounded, and the I we've said was E, and that has become I because of the great vowel shift. So knif. And so these are examples of sounded change. What is knife today was a knif. What is night today was a knicht. What is mate today, or what is meat was mate, etc., etc. Okay, guys, so these are examples of changes in the sound. So language, does it change? Move on to syntax. Syntax refers to the arrangement and interrelationships of words. This is the kind of thing you take in grammar 1 and grammar 2. So syntax means the area of linguistics that deals with how words are arranged in a sentence. So this is known as syntax. It's one of the components of grammar. One of the components of grammar. Grammar as meaning the whole system of language, not just a grammar, the kind of a grammar that you take in grammar 1 and grammar 2. But grammar 1 and grammar 2, these courses deal with syntax, one of the components of language. Now, Old English, also known as Anglo-Saxon, Old English, the syntax of Old English was different from the syntax of modern day English, modern English. Old English, by the way, when you talk about Old English, we talk about the period beginning from 449, the beginning of English, 449 AD, until 1100. This period is known as Old English. Middle English is from 1100 to 1500. This is Middle English. And Modern English after 1500. So the last 500 years are considered Modern English, with two periods, the early period and the late period of Modern English. So the early period from 500 to 800, and from 800 to the present day, this is the late modern period. Old English was a synthetic language. Modern English is an analytic language. So different typology, different types of languages in terms of syntax, the way words are combined and arranged in a sentence. What does this simply mean? Old English was synthetic, meaning the arrangement of words and the order of words within the sentence in Old English depended heavily on inflections, on word endings. The order of words depended on word endings. In Modern English, we have only 8 of these word endings that we have retained, that English has retained. But Old English was heavily inflected. Many word endings. So it was classified as a synthetic language. But Modern English is different. Modern English does not depend on inflections or word endings to denote or to mark relationships, grammatical relationships between words. Modern English depends on word order. An example of a word ending, a grammatical inflection, is in Modern English is the plural s, or the third person singular s, or the ed marker, the past tense marker, or the ing, or the comparative er, taller, shorter, or the superlative est. I have already counted six. There are 8 in English, in Modern English. And so there are then differences between the syntax of Old English and the syntax of Modern English. Now, what has this to do with the study of text? In the study of text, this is relevant to us in this way. When we look at a text that makes use of old syntax, then we understand what's going on, because this is how was English used in the past. Sometimes you may read a modern text, a text written by a modern writer, contemporary writer, but you find archaic uses or usages, archaisms. The writer using archaic forms. This is usually done to create an effect, giving you an archaic feel. It is usually done for a literary effect, an aesthetic effect. For example, if you look at the poem on page 60 by Wordsworth, the italicized elements follow the structure of older English syntax, because in Modern English we would place these elements in a different position. So the author here is using older ways of arranging these elements. Now, Wordsworth belongs to the modern period of English, the way we use English today. But he deliberately used archaic forms to create an effect, a literary effect, maybe to make us think of the past, go back in time. So it is done for a literary or aesthetic effect. In distant countries I have been. In modern English we would say I have been in distant countries. So the adverbial element, the adverbial constituent would come after the verb, not at the beginning. I have been in distant countries. In distant countries I have been, and yet I have not often seen a healthy man, a man fully grown, weep in the public roads alone, but such a one on English ground and in the broad highway I met. So again, in modern English we would say I met such a one on English ground and in the broad highway. So we would begin with the subject and then the verb and then the third element, in this case the adverbial. So I met such a one, blah blah blah. He came, his cheeks with tears were wet. In modern English we would say his cheeks were wet with tears, rather than with tears were wet. And so the author here systematically resorts to archaisms, resorts to old English syntax. The author here systematically resorts to old English syntax. Why? We've said to create a literary or aesthetic effect. Okay? Pronouns. An example of change in pronouns. In Middle English, people used to distinguish between thou and you, or you and thou, when referring to a second person, single second person, or singular second person. They used to use you to refer to a superior, as a form of respect, to an aristocrat, to your boss. And so it was used to address a superior, while thou was used to address someone lower in rank, an inferior, a subordinate, or to show intimacy and friendship. To show intimacy and friendship. And so, when we look at the text on page 61, we can understand this shifting in the pronouns in this text written in Middle English, a play by Shakespeare about Hamlet. I think you can see why the relevance of the study of change to the study of text. I think you can see the relevance of the study of language change to the study of text. Look at the text, read it on your own before we discuss it. Have you noticed the shift in the pronouns by the mother? The mother begins, the queen, the mother of Hamlet, Prince Hamlet. She says, Hamlet, thou hast thy father much offended. You have offended your father. Hamlet gets slightly irritated and says, Mother, you have my father much offended. It's you who offended my father. The mother obviously gets angry or irritated by the way her child retorted and says, Come, you answer with an idle tongue. You are a badly behaved child. The boy says, Hamlet, the son, Go, you question with a wicked tongue. So, when we look at the first exchange between the mother and her son, the queen and Hamlet, it is natural, normal for the mother to use thou when addressing her son. Her son is, because looking at the relationship between them, she is the mother in a higher position, and this is her son, lower position. So thou. And so when he addresses his mother, he says you, as a form of respect. So this is understood. But what we don't understand, or what is significant for us to consider, is when the mother addresses Hamlet the second time, she changes or shifts from thou to you. Come, you answer, not thou. And he responds, go, you. So he still retains you because he's talking to his mother. So why did the mother shift between thou and you? The second you, we can guess or speculate that the mother used you to distance, now that she's being irritated by the way her child responded, his rejoinder. So she used you to indicate or to convey distance rather than intimacy. Intimacy, which is associated with thou, closeness. So now she wishes to convey distancing. So she used you in the second instance, while she used thou in the first instance. And so you can see that the relevance of language change, the study of language change is relevant to the study of text. Okay. The last example of change is lexis. We, in reading skills, talked about the processes of word formation and lexical expansion, and we've seen that there are many words, many ways in which words can enter the language. Words over the years may change their meanings, develop positive connotations or negative connotations, may stop being used. The word gay, as we said at the beginning, in the past meant happy, but nowadays gay has acquired a new meaning, homosexual, and so words and lexis do change. Okay, archaism. We've already talked about archaism, and we've said that archaism is a linguistic then. Archaism is the use of a particular pronunciation or word or even syntactic feature. So it could be the pronunciation of a word, or it could be a word or it could be the syntax of old English in this case. So that's an archaism, an instance of using an older word or pronunciation or syntactic feature. And we've already said that this is usually done by modern writers to give you an archaic feel and so to create an effect. Some of the varieties of language registers that continue to use archaic forms are the church institution and the legal system. Much of the language used in the legal system nowadays retains old forms, archaisms, and the language used in the church. Maybe to give you, a mysterious and appropriate, a mysterious experience, religious experience. We're going to talk more about the legal, variety today in the afternoon session. There is also a long tradition of poetic texts using archaism. So poetry also uses archaisms, and I have said that one main reason why a writer would or a poet would use an archaic form or word is to give a literary effect, like the poem by Wordsworth in distant countries I have been, etc., etc. We have just discussed. The last heading here is the feminist changes to language. As your classmates defined, the feminists are a group of people who think that language is more favorable to men or to the male, and so it's a political movement, a social movement, an ideology that it tries to or that aims to establish equality between the sexes, and so the feminists have advocated some changes, have called for some changes in the language. And so pronouns, for example, that are used to refer to, when using he, for example, to mean both sexes. For example, everyone qualified will be given the job regardless of his sex. So his here is used to refer to both males and females generically, but it is his, which we associate with man. And so they have called for a change of such language, and so they've managed to make some changes. And so nowadays, people who are not being sensitive to this issue might be labeled or accused of being sexist, discriminatory. And so the tendency nowadays, for example, is to use, instead of using mankind to mean both, as a generic noun, to mean both women and men, mankind is being replaced by people or humankind. Chairperson is being used to replace chairman, especially if the chairperson is a woman. Leading or chairing a meeting is a woman, so it's more now polite or more politically correct to use a chairperson. So a neutral, a gender neutral term, such as chairperson, such as flight attendant instead of saying stewardess, police officer instead of saying police woman or policeman. Okay, in the past it was policeman, even if the police officer is a woman. So they have found such uses discriminatory, and they have called for a reform. So this has led to changes in the language. So feminist change, or it changes to language. So new guidelines have been made to incorporating or accommodating the feminist changes, or the changes induced by feminists. Okay, let's move on now quickly to the second unit. Move on, guys.